For over a year, hundreds of thousands of farmers in India have marched in protest against 3 farm acts that were passed by the Modi government in September 2020. These laws deregulate the agricultural market, opening the door to large corporations to further squeeze out India's small farmers. The 2020 Farm Acts are part of Prime Minister Modi's larger policy of privatization and deregulation of India's economy. Some of the largest protests involved 500,000 farmers, and there were many marches to the capital, Delhi. The protesting farmers were met with beating, tear gas, and water cannons by the police. On November 19th, Modi's government gave in to the pressure and promised to repeal the Farm Acts. In July 2021, a wave of public protest began in South Africa. It was sparked by former President Zuma's arrest and imprisonment, and then grew into a widespread revolt of poor South Africans. The media has focused almost all its attention on the looting of stores and destruction of public offices and banks. The country has the highest unemployment rate in the world at 44%, and poverty has been made much worse during the COVID pandemic, which hit South Africa the hardest in the continent.
I'm looting because we apply for jobs, they don't give us jobs. We try and go to offices, try a strike, it doesn't even work.
Today, South Africa is witnessing what some of us who have been warning the so-called politicians about the reality that whatever that they are doing to the poor will meet them in the future.
So far, over 300 people have died and thousands were arrested. In May 2021, Palestinians rose up against the Zionist occupation of their country. The revolt started in response to the evacuation of Palestinian families from their homes in East Jerusalem, as well as police harassment of protesters in the city. The protests escalated into a confrontation with police at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and then spread to the entire country. When Hamas and Islamic Jihad fired rockets from Gaza into Israel, the Israeli Air Force retaliated with a sustained airstrike on Gaza, killing over 250 people and wounding 2,000. 72,000 Palestinians were displaced from their destroyed homes. The protests around the world in solidarity with the Palestinians were unprecedented in size. Under this enormous international pressure, the Israeli government finally agreed to a ceasefire on May 21st, after 11 days of bombing. In February 2021, Myanmar's military overthrew the nation's democratically elected government and set up a military dictatorship. Within days, millions of people took to the streets in protest. They conducted a general strike, held huge rallies of hundreds of thousands, barricaded neighborhoods, fought pitched battles with the police and army, and began guerrilla-style military training. Despite harsh repression by the state, the people of Myanmar are still fighting against the dictatorship. In the past months, soldiers and police officers have begun to question their role in repressing a popular movement, and at least 2,500 have defected. In August 2021, the US finally ended its 20-year war on Afghanistan. As the US withdrew, the Taliban took power again. They quickly moved to deny women access to equal education, employment, and political participation. Thousands of Afghans, especially women, are protesting the Taliban regime. While the Taliban have tried to disperse these protests, including with whips and gunfire, rallies against the new government have continued. 2 years ago, hundreds of thousands of Sudanese people forced the dictator Omar al-Bashir out of power, ending in a power-sharing agreement with the military and civilian leaders. In October 2021, the Sudanese military carried out a coup in violation of this agreement. In response, hundreds of thousands protested in the streets, demanding civilian leadership. At least 40 protesters were killed and hundreds were wounded. The military agreed to release the former leaders they had arrested and reinstate them in the government. But the pro-democracy protesters reject any power sharing with the military, and the protests continue. In January 2021, thousands of Tunisians protested against police violence and unemployment. The president responded by suspending parliament and ruling by decree in July. Since then, many more thousands of Tunisians have protested this power grab and the increasing police brutality against protesters. The Tunisian Trade Union Federation called for a one-day general strike in November after a protester died from inhaling police tear gas. The protests continue. In April 2021, Colombia's President Marquez proposed a regressive tax reform that would have increased taxes for the Colombian working class. During the pandemic, the poverty rate increased from 35% to 42%, and millions are unemployed. The tax reform bill was the last straw. Millions of Colombians took to the streets, and the unions called for a general strike. The police force of Colombia, which is supported by the US, brutally attacked the protesters, but they were not deterred, and the protests grew further. On May 2nd, the president was forced to withdraw his tax plan, but even this has not quelled the protests. The people in the streets are demanding an end to police brutality and the murder of activists. In the past 3 months, tens of thousands of workers in the US have gone on strike. Kellogg's workers in Michigan, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee, carpenters in Seattle, and John Deere workers in Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas.
And we just asking for a comparable wage, what we deserve. We want everybody to deserve a pension, man. With health care these days, we deserve free health care. We want that good pre-97 contract, if possible, as close to. Because we worked through a pandemic. It's been a rough year for everybody. You know what I'm saying? We went through a pandemic. A lot of people worked, never missed a day, never was late. I think we should be rewarded for that, man. We was with the company like last year. We were so essential. Just show us how essential now when we need y'all at the most and our families need you. That's all we asking for.
Working class people are fighting back on a scale not seen in decades in this country. While still small compared to the strikes of the 30s, 40s, and 70s, this strike wave shows that workers are getting fed up with the system that oppresses them. Hopefully, this is a sign of a broader awakening in the working class, and a step towards the wider fight that is needed to transform this system.